Recently, the policy of UBI, or Universal Basic Income, has been popping up in the news recently. Automation is entering the market, and people are fearful their jobs will be replaced with robots. I see UBI as a knee-jerk reaction to automation, similar to the recent $15 hour minimum wage narrative, to combat high housing prices. Without any rational thought or evidence to support these claims, the American voters have rallied behind coercive invasions of the free market by the state. These kinds of reactions are a sign of civilization in decline, a populace whose IQ and human capital is decreasing with every generation. Check out my video on the minimum wage. I believe I succinctly prove the inefficacy and the destructive nature of that policy. So on to UBI. My first criticism focuses on the nature of free money and the behaviors it engenders in humans. In an environment of abundancy, humans tend to change their behaviors when it comes to resource utilization and reproduction. They tend to be very profligate in consumption and also more licentious, causing more single-parent households. For proof of this, just look at the welfare system as it stands today. In the United States, that is. There is a direct correlation with the advent of the welfare state during the Johnson administration and the rise of single motherhood. The number of children that live in single mother households have steadily risen from the 1970s to 2012, when it reached its peak at about 18 million, and it's remained virtually unchanged every year hitherto. Under a UBI system, waste will be prodigious and prolific. Resources will be used up at a high rate, putting even more strain on the environment. And that's interesting to note, that most UBI supporters are leftists who also support vehemently the environmental movement. You would think they would focus on more government waste and eliminating it than, let's say, the inefficient electric car. Some articles I've read suggest that UBI is a fix-all in terms of the welfare system. The authors claim that many subsidy programs such as Medicaid, Social Security, food stamps, and Medicare will no longer be needed. Let's be honest with ourselves, these programs will continue. Millions of Americans are way too dependent on them as it is, and these dependents have been taking subsidies from programs for decades. They will not relinquish them. It will be political suicide for a politician to even attempt to touch them, to even attempt to alter them in any way. It's just like the aforementioned welfare programs, UBI is no different. Once consumer index prices rise to meet the levels of inflation caused by the dump of money into the system by UBI, there will inevitably be a nationwide call to increase the UBI payment to keep up with the devaluation of the dollar and the skyrocketing prices. The same claimants that propose UBI will replace all other welfare programs also claim that UBI won't cost society any wealth. That is, it's going to be a one-to-one distribution from taxes onto the redistributive payments. Now, this is absolute nonsense. Federal and state bureaucracies will have to be formed for collection and distribution of the payments, and employees of those bureaucracies will have to be hired to oversee it. Just like the other welfare bureaucracies, it will be bloated virtually instantly. Another article claimed UBI will stimulate the economy through consumer spending. This theory is called demand-side economics. It's a macroeconomic theory made popular by John Maynard Keynes in the early 20th century. It argues that economic growth is more effectively created by high demand for products and services. Therefore, more money in the hands of consumers sparks the economy through spending. This theory is a fallacy, and it's been proven to be a fallacy. Without investment in production, growth is impossible. Stagnation prevails. An economy that practices demand-side economics burns through its wealth. It is unable to create wealth because the constant consumption consumes savings. Savings that can be used for investment. Investment that can be used as capital by burgeoning businesses. Demand-side economics has been on display in most Western countries since the decision to abandon the gold standard for fiat currency. The West is in severe debt. and it has become insurmountable to recompense what is owed without a catastrophic economic collapse. Simply said, we're too poor to pay for UBI. Another article I read stated that UBI payments will be subject to tax as income at the end of the year. Despite this cannibalistic practice sounding absurd, it has been done before. In the mid-1920s, the Soviet Union purchased grain from farmers, then later taxed them on that same income. However, the state might not even choose to increase taxes or create more taxes for UBI. If they choose not to, because of political pressures, the government would be forced to borrow or print more money, which is what we have been doing for the past 10 years since the 2008 crash. However, if government raises taxes to pay for UBI, it will more likely raise corporate taxes. This would put more burden on companies, causing them to raise commodity prices or leave the country altogether, causing more unemployment than we already have. Lastly, I want to address the societal impact of UBI on a population. Just like any other subsidy program, UBI will engender indolence, complacency, and irresponsibility, especially in low-ability people who already have a predilection to exhibit these traits. One of the UBI's goals is to allay stress so recipients can go back to college to improve their job skills. I contend this does the opposite. It disincentivizes work. A guaranteed monthly stipend eliminates the risk factor of survival. It's essentially promised safety. There's nothing to push you, no strife in your life to get you off your ass. It eliminates the primal thing that makes us, as humans, achieve greatness. Finland tried UBI on a group of low-income people, a lot of them unemployed, and gave them a monthly stipend for about, I think it was 2 years. And it failed. They just released the results of the experiment, and indeed it made people happier, but it did not necessarily increase people's propensity to find work. So we already have proof for this. The point of me making this video is because the new candidates for the Democratic presidential election next year, a lot of them have been touting UBI. Andrew Yang and AOC, she's not a presidential candidate, but she's been very popular and she's touting socialism. I want to make everybody aware that these kind of socialist, expansionary governmental policies just don't work. You can't just spend money that you don't have. You can't write checks for money that's not in your bank. And that's what the West has been doing since it's got off the gold standard. And a country can't survive that way. My solution is to let the market go unfettered. Take off the shackles of policies and regulation and just let the economy deal with itself.